Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I finally finished my Lion El Jonson model, and I wanted to share with everyone how I went about painting him. So for people who are new to the channel, occasionally there's no regular rhyme or reason just quite yet. Whenever life allows, I like to do some painting on live stream here on YouTube as well as Twitch. And when I first acquired my Lion El Jonson model, I did 2 painting sessions live, and they were very lengthy, so I didn't really think people would want to go back and sit through all of that footage. It was close to 10 hours when I was all said and done. So I've gone ahead and condensed down everything that I did step by step. Now I'm going to go through everything, and I do want to caveat that in certain clips you'll see, things might be done that I haven't talked about yet. I will cover everything, but when working on a big model like this and you're waiting for sections to dry, I tend to hop around quite a lot. But don't worry, we will get through everything. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about preparation. So as you can see on screen, I went ahead and separated the lion into 4 sub-assemblies to make painting this model a little bit easier. With the flowing robes that he has, attaching him to the base would have made getting underneath the robes very difficult. So I left him off of the base. I went ahead and kept the Watchers in the Dark on the base. I also left the backpack separate as well as the shield. That just gives us easy access so that we can make sure that we can paint all of the visible areas and then assemble him later. So for this project, I went ahead and broke out the Sam Lynn's weapon rack by Monument Hobbies. These are a collection of sable hair brushes and a couple of large synthetic brushes that are specifically designed for miniature painters. So they have very large bellies, they're able to hold a lot of paint, but then they come to a very precise fine tip, which is great for doing detail work. So primarily for this model, I worked with the number 3 size brush, which gave you a decent sized belly and let you work for longer before you needed to reload it. And then for the really fine detail, I went down to a size 1. Alright, so let's get to the painting. So the first section that I want to start with are all of the creams. So this is going to be the ribbons of the purity seals, the underskirt, so the bottommost section of his robes, underneath the main robe, and then also underneath the cloak that he's wearing. So I base coated all of these areas in Rathbone initially. This is a great example of the painting process not quite going the way you plan it out. Initially I wanted to use Skeleton Horde to provide shading, but I really didn't like the way that it looked. So then I went ahead and mixed Ushabti Bone and Wraithbone and used that color to manually paint in my shadow areas, and then used Wraithbone to clean up the sections that would be more exposed to the light and would appear a little bit later. Alright, so next I worked on the green sections of the model, which this is going to be the top side of the robe, the hood of the robe, the top side of the cloak, as well as the robes for the Watchers in the Dark. So to base coat these areas, I used Iosian Green from Privateer Press's P3 line. It's a really great mid-tone green. It's very vibrant, and I really love this color. It's the primary color I use on my elves from War Machine. Now, once I got that laid down, I wanted to add some character to the robes. So I made a mix of Incubi Darkness and Warpstone Glow. That was going to be my shadow color. I was going to use pure Warpstone for my midtone, and then Sybarite Green mixed with Warpstone for my highlight. And what I did was I stippled these colors using very small, precise dots and hash marks in the appropriate areas. So my shadow color down in the folds of the robe, my highlight color up on the raised creases, and then my midtone everywhere in between. And I went ahead and stippled all over the cloak and the robes, and this just added some texture to the miniature. I'm not a huge fan of smooth cloaks on Warhammer models. But anyway, once I was done building up that texture to a level that I liked, and given the regalness of the model, I didn't want the cloak to look completely distressed, so I didn't go overboard with this. I went ahead and mixed a glaze of Iosian green with Lamian medium, roughly 1 part paint to 3 parts medium, and then I went ahead and glazed all over these areas just to help tie everything together into the original base coat. Okay, so next, really nice and simple part of painting this miniature, I went ahead and worked on the golds. So I based all of the gold areas with molten bronze, another P3 paint here. Excellent coverage, and I really like this color as the base of my golds. I use it all of the time. Now, one stylistic choice that I made to try and speed the project up was the iconography on the shoulder pads. I went ahead and just did the whole set of iconography in gold instead of doing it multicolored. Once I had the base coats down though, I went ahead and washed everything with Druchii Violet. This gives you a nice warm red tone and kind of makes a rose gold appearance. And then once that wash had dried, I came in with Canoptic Alloy and highlighted all of the gold areas that we had previously painted. Canoptic Alloy is very bright. It's by far my favorite highlight color for gold and brass. It looks amazing, and it gives really sharp detail. Alright, so we have a little bit of leather on the miniature, namely the belt, the holster, the scabbard that the One Watcher is wearing, and there's a little strip of hide showing on the lion pelt draped over his shoulder blades. So for these areas, I went ahead and base coated them with Rhinox hide, very nice dark rich brown color, and then I layered Bugman's Glow on top of it. Now after that had dried, I went ahead and washed it with Wildwood, which darkened it down, and then when the Wildwood was dry, I came back in and stippled Bugman's Glow to kind of give it that patchwork worn leather appearance. Now there are a couple of white details, namely the iconography on the chest, the Dark Angel's chapter symbol, and then the paired swords on his left kneecap. I went ahead and based these areas in Ulthuan Gray. It's a very light off-white color in the Citadel paint range. And then once that was dry, I straight from the pot just hit those areas with Gryph-Charger Gray. This is a really nice off-white color that I feel looks really good when you've got textured detail. Right, so next I went ahead and attacked the purity seals. So the wax part I based with Sanguine Base, another P3 paint, and then highlighted with Sanguine Highlight. These are very rich, sort of reddish purple colors. They look really good for your wax seals. I then went ahead and hit them with Shyish Purple, thinned out just a little bit with some water to go ahead and add some shading. And then on the parchment part, I very simply just hit that with Skeleton Horde. Alright, so next up, let's talk about the sword fealty. This was my favorite part of painting the entire model. And to get my blend here, I went ahead and prepared 9 paints on my wet palette. And so how I did this, I chose a color progression from pure white to a really nice dark blue. So I chose a white ink, Baharoth blue, Temple Guard blue, Teclis blue, and then Cantor blue. And for each 2 paints going down the line, I went ahead and mixed a 50-50 intermediary color. So in order to prepare to paint the sword, I went ahead and coated it with Ulthuan Gray to cover up the black primer. And then starting with white up near the hilt, and then going all the way through my 9 color progression down to Cantor blue at the tip, I had segmented the sword into roughly equal segments, and then very quickly applied my paints so that I could wet blend them before they dried. Now to smooth out that blend, because it's not going to be perfect right at the start, I went ahead and glazed Aethermatic Contrast mixed with Lamian Medium, roughly about 1 part paint to 3 or 4 parts Lamian medium, and I had to glaze over it roughly about 7 or 8 times before I was happy with the blend. You could do more, you could do less. It's really up to your personal taste. But once I was happy with the blending, oh, and I should mention, in between layers, you have to let that glaze dry completely. Because it's so thin, if you try to work over it and it's not completely dry, you risk ripping that paint off of the sword. But once I was done glazing it and I was happy with the way that it looked, I went ahead and edge highlighted it with the white ink and Baharoth blue. So the power nodes first got a coat of Baharoth, and then just a point highlight of white where I thought it made sense, and then I edge highlighted the sides and the center of the sword with Baharoth, and then added lines of white down toward the sharpest points, and then up near the hilt where the power source is. Alright, and now for the very, very dark armor. The very first thing I did was any cleanup that needed to happen. I went ahead and used Satin Black by AK Interactive to touch up those panels and make sure that I was working from black. Now, the rest of the armor, I want to give her credit. I used the Louise Sugden method from her Warhammer Plus tutorial on black armor. I really, really like the look of it. And I will admit, I was a little apprehensive about doing this, because typically if I'm painting Space Marines, I'm all about painting them quickly. So I normally dry brush my power armor to get my edge highlights, but I really wanted to try and push myself here because it's a Primarch. So for my first layer, I did a 50-50 mix of Satin Black with Incubi Darkness, and then I thinned this down to a very, very thin glaze. And then I just did one coat of this in a very thick, broad line around all of the edges of the armor. Now, this will be very, very difficult to see on camera, and even in person once it had dried. I actually had to look for the difference in the finish compared to the pure satin of the pure black to the slightly matte finish of the Satin Black mixed with the Incubi Darkness. But for the next step, we're coming in with pure Incubi Darkness, thinned it down into a thin glaze consistency again with some water. And now I'm doing another chunky highlight, but in a smaller area than what we had previously painted. So this is just sort of laying the foundation for our gradual transition from pure black in the middle of the plates going to a lighter color on the edges. So next, I went ahead and took Thunderhawk Blue, and I know what you guys might be thinking, with Incubi Darkness, it's sort of a really dark turquoise, but now we're shifting into blue and we want green armor. It's okay, I promise you it'll all work out. So with that Thunderhawk Blue, now we're doing our traditional edge highlight. So all of the hard edges of the armor get coated with this, trying to be as neat as possible. Now after the Thunderhawk Blue, we use Fenrisian Gray, which is a very sort of light blue-gray. And we're edge highlighting still, but we're not doing the entire edge. We're moving closer to where the panel lines come to a point, and we're leaving the Thunderhawk Blue sort of like in the middle of the edge. And then for my final highlight color, I'm 50-50 mixed Fenrisian Gray and Ulthuan Gray. Now, Louise Sugden, in her video, she used Blue Horror. I didn't have that color, and mixing Ulthuan Gray and Fenrisian Gray got me very, very close to Blue Horror, so it all worked out. And here, I'm just doing a spot highlight on all of the very, very sharpest corners to help them pop a little bit more. Now, I forgot while I was talking, but as I'm going through these stages, I'm also hitting all of the rivets on the armor. And now that we have our sort of, off gray, sort of bluish edge highlighting going, very sort of turquoisey, we're going to color shift this with a filter over to green. And so how I did this, I went ahead and mixed up a glaze of Creed Camo contrast paint. It was roughly 1 part paint to 4 parts Lamian medium. I use Lamian medium instead of contrast medium just so that it would behave more like a layer paint and less like a contrast paint. But I use Creed Camo because of the translucency. So I still want the vibrancy of the highlights that we just did to come through. I just want to shift that turquoise color more toward green and away from the blue. So with this, very simply, you just coat it all over the highlights that we did and the entirety of the black armor panels. And very similar to the sword, you have to let this dry completely in between coats, but it did not take as many coats. I think I only did 3 coats on the armor to get it to where it is. All right, and here is the lion with all of the acrylic steps completed. Unfortunately, I neglected to get footage of how I completed the basing elements. So the metal rusted statue piece, that's just very simply iron breaker that I went in with 2 enamel rust washes, a light wash and a dark wash, and just rusted that out very quickly. The earth bits are just Rhinox hide, and then the gray tiles are just Dawnstone. And then once I had those base coated, I figured that, the lion is blocking all of these areas and they're really going to be in shadow. So I didn't even bother highlighting them. I just went ahead and washed the earth and the stonework with a dark brown enamel. And I used the Africa Cores wash by Ammo by Mig. All right, so with all of the acrylics done, I went ahead and applied a gloss varnish. Once that varnish had settled and cured, I went ahead and did a little bit of pin washing using a Ammo by Meg panel line wash, really just around the trim on the cloak, and then to add a little bit of separation where I felt it was needed between colors on the miniature. But once that was dry, I went ahead, sealed it with a satin varnish to knock back some of that shine, and added some basing material. This is the Geek Gaming Scenics base ready. I mixed I believe it's called Dark Urban Scatter or Gothic Urban Scatter. I can't remember the exact name, with the original Urban Scatter. So it's a black mix and a gray mix. I mix them together so that you can get some really interesting texture on the base. And that's Lion El Jonson all finished. Overall, this was a really fun project. I pushed myself on some things, and I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one.